meeting today with Arlis Reynolds, who is running for City Council candidate of District 5. Thank you for meeting with us today.
Thank you.
Let's start off with, what is your connection to Costa Mesa? What have you done for our city?
So Costa Mesa is home. I grew up in the west side of Costa Mesa in the Freedom Homes neighborhood. I went to all local schools, starting with preschool at Child's Pace on the east side. I went to Pomona, Victoria, Tewinkle, and Estancia High School. I was in the Boys and Girls Club, in Girls Inc., spent my summers at YMCA. I played in the local AYSO leagues before moving on to club soccer. And after graduating from Estancia, moved east to go to school at MIT, got my engineering degree, but I've always stayed connected to home. I now have gotten very involved in some of our local political issues around development and our parks and open space, of course, and serve now as vice chair of our Parks and Recreation Commission.
I love that you went to Girls Inc. because it really shows that program is working.
Oh yeah.
So those still confused about district voting, where is your district exactly, the best you could explain it, and who are you running against?
So District 5 is one of the, I think, most complex districts. It has the most number of distinct neighborhoods and probably the biggest perimeter. So I usually describe District 5 as one of two west side districts, where the west side is everything west of the 55, everything south of the Estancia Fairview Park border, of course east of the Santa Ana River and bordered by Newport Beach. And then there's a District 4 which takes a slice right out of the middle, and District 5 wraps like a horseshoe around District 4.
Yeah, who are you running against?
So there are three people in the race, myself, Rebecca Trahan, and Alan Mansour.
Now, speaking of Rebecca Trahan, Costa Mesa Brief, we did already meet with her. We didn't get to ask her this question, but she has been making claims on Facebook that you're lying about your engineering qualifications.
Yeah, you know, I guess this is politics. I got my degree in mechanical engineering from MIT, arguably one of the top universities in the country. Work at an engineering firm. I was manager of a group called the Measurement and Engineering Group. I hired engineers. We do work that requires engineering qualifications, so I feel pretty confident saying I am an engineer.
How do you feel about future development in District 5? I know that was a huge point during the last election.
Yeah. So development issues are what really got me involved in local politics, and particularly the Banning Ranch issue. This was a development project that was proposed not in Costa Mesa, but one that would have had a huge impact on Costa Mesa residents, especially on the west side. And when I got involved in that fight, I realized that a lot of people in Costa Mesa weren't aware of the potential impacts. You know, we need to, of course, grow as a city, but we need to be very, very considerate about how development impacts our current residents, how it impacts traffic patterns, and of course how it impacts open space and just public health in our neighborhoods.
What about Fairview Park? You mentioned Banning Ranch. A lot of our voters are asking for candidates or council members that could just further the protection. So what more protection can you give Fairview Park?
Yeah, well, I fought very hard for Measure AA, and I thank all of the residents who spent hours and hours and hours collecting signatures to get Measure AA on the ballot. I helped create a video on Measure AA. I don't know if you've seen that.
I think I just watched my own video on Measure AA.
We'll trade videos. Fairview Park, I mean, we're sitting in it, right? It's this incredible place and a really great amenity for Costa Mesa. People travel into Costa Mesa on the weekends and after work on the weekdays to come to Fairview Park. I've been the liaison to the Fairview Park Steering Committee while I've been on the Parks and Recreation Commission. Completely support keeping Fairview Park as a passive, natural, open space. I do want to see us invest in it more to really kind of bring back to life some of the natural habitats that make this place so special.
So being the Fairview Parks liaison, it seems like out of all the candidates for your district, you would be the best for Fairview Park.
Yeah, so I've done the most work really to support Fairview Park. There is an important distinction. Both of my opponents have supported the turnaround, for example, at the end of Pacific Avenue. I do not support the turnaround. I think we need to be very diligent in protecting all of the stipulations of Measure AA and just say no to any encroachment on the park.
What are some of the complaints you're hearing when you're out there on the campaign trail?
Number one issue, of course, is homelessness. I think a few years ago it would have been development in response to a lot of the development projects that have come up in the past few years. But right now it's the impacts of homelessness on the streets and the rising crime that we're observing. I think that's directly related to the sober living home issues.
So that's three subjects we're going to cover. So let's start with homelessness.
Yeah.
What are your plans to further address the homelessness on top of what our city already does?
Yeah, and so we're doing a lot, right? You hit it right on the head. I'm glad to see that there's a lot of both regional mobilization and then statewide mobilization around this issue. This is not a Costa Mesa issue. It's not an Orange County issue. This is a statewide and really a national issue. We need to continue the efforts of our Network for Homeless Solutions to understand who the homeless population is and understand that there are different service needs among that population. I would work very closely with the experts on the issue who are guiding us on short-term solutions and long-term solutions. In addition to some of the proposals that have already been discussed at previous debates, one thing that I think is really important is what I call activation of our public spaces. Our reaction to some of the issues right now has been to, close restrooms, turn off the lights early. A lot of residents get home and just stay inside when they get home because they're not comfortable walking on our streets. I think we need to reverse that trend because that just leaves kind of dark, vacated streets, which makes it easy to loiter. And if we find ways to activate the community, right, more events like concerts in the park, better lighting on our streets, we'll get the community out more, make it a livelier place. And I think that just naturally makes it, makes people feel safer.
That's interesting. And now crime, how else can we decrease crime? I know you mentioned lights for homelessness and that would help with some crime, but what else?
Yeah, so I had a really good opportunity to do a ride-along. I did the graveyard shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. with one of our police officers. And it was really an insightful time. I was telling the police officer at the end of our morning, I guess, that I felt like I witnessed the kind of evolution of how a kid might find drugs at a high school party all the way to then being, 40 or 50 without a job, without hope, living on the streets. And what we're doing right now with our police officers, and you've heard, of course, that we're understaffed, we have staffing enough to try to manage the problem. We don't have staffing enough to be proactive about the problem. So of course we need to manage, but we need to get to the source of the problem and make sure that we're able to find out, where the drugs are coming from. So staffing our police in a way that allows us to have specialized units to go to the root causes of crime in our city is a step we need to take very quickly.
Now, speaking of the staffing, you and some of your, running mates have been attacked for accepting money from unions. So when you're talking about staffing, people are concerned you're taking money from the unions. Could that affect your voting on contracts in the future?
So I think people are referring to the police and firefighter endorsements. Public safety is the #1 issue in Costa Mesa. Our public safety teams, I think, have not had the support and the ability to have conversations with their city council members who are making decisions about what resources they have. The endorsements, the discussions that I've had with those two parties is about how can we functionally, effectively, and efficiently address crime. The endorsements are about having a partnership that's going to be able to stop crime in Costa Mesa.
So you don't think it'll affect your view at all when voting on any contracts?
No, I'm a very, very fair, honest person. I'm very rational in my decision making and very careful about the responsibility that a city council member has to be fair and honest in any negotiations.
So that leads us to sober living homes. What more can we do to fight these sober living homes in family neighborhoods or from increasing our homelessness?
Yeah, the sober living home issue is something that we've allowed to get very out of hand. It's always harder to stop a problem when it's become very big than from early on. First, I think it's really important to remember in our conversations about sober living that the sort of the nuisances created by a lot of the homes are really harming the good work of some of our really good sober living homes. There is a national crisis of drug addiction, and I have met people who graduated from these homes and were really helped by these homes. I worry that the conversation about the bad operators harms the work of the good operators. But we do have those bad operators, and we need to be able to crack down on them. It's a difficult situation for our local enforcement because we're constrained by a lot of the laws. We need cooperation with our state assembly. We need to work very closely with our members in Sacramento to be able to change some laws and allow some more local enforcement.
If you weren't running, who would you vote for in your district?
Well, I'm running for my district because I think I'm the best person to represent District 5.
Okay, so I know everyone actually already knows the answer to this question, but I have to ask it. What is your stance on the needle exchange?
Yes, so I oppose the needle exchange. It's been a little bit frustrating about the kind of misleading information on this issue. We established in the first debate that all city council members, all candidates are opposed to the needle exchange program. But let me tell you more. I think actions speak louder than words. When I heard about the needle exchange program, a proposal here in Costa Mesa, my first thought was that sounds crazy. I know this neighborhood that they're talking about, and it's completely inappropriate for us here. I read the police memos. The police created 2 memos explaining all of the issues with the program, took that information, simplified it, made a flyer, went out walking in the neighborhoods, talked to residents about the proposal, gave them information about how they could submit their comments. I was the only District 5 candidate who actually submitted public comment during the public review period. And I was the only District 5 candidate to show up in person at the emergency city council meeting to oppose, to support joining the lawsuit to oppose the needle exchange program.
To be fair, Alan Mansour is one of your opponents, so he was by default there.
He wasn't there, actually. Oh. He called in.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
He called into that meeting.
Okay. But what about the portable restrooms?
I agree with the City Council decision to not implement portable restrooms, although I do want to applaud Councilmember John Stevens for proposing a solution. We do have a real issue with defecation on our streets. I have neighbors who've had poop in their front yards. Children in our parks are finding human poop in the parks. We need to find a solution for that, and I applaud John Stevens for bringing up a proposal. I think the council made the right decision in saying no, but we can't just ignore problems. I think we need to continue to investigate potential solutions.
What's the difference between you and the other candidates running in District 5?
Yeah, so there's a couple pretty clear distinctions. On development issues, Alan Mansour and I have been on the opposite sides of some really important issues. I mentioned Banning Ranch. That was a project that I worked very, very hard in opposing. In 2016, Alan Mansour said he supported the Banning Ranch project and thought it would be good for our community. Most residents disagreed with that. Measure Y was a big issue in 2016. I worked hard to encourage people to support Measure Y. That really restricted City Council's ability to grant a lot of variances. Alan Mansour opposed Measure Y. And Rebecca Trahan, there was something that really popped up right away. She has previously worked at and has been endorsed by a company called Big League Dreams. And if you remember several years ago, they were actually coming into the city and trying to privatize Tewinkle Park, the baseball fields at Tewinkle Park. That's very, very different than my approach. I think all of our parks need to be public, and I really want to increase access to our parks in Costa Mesa.
You mentioned when Mansour ran in 2016, so he already has a council seat.
Yes, so this is a really important point, actually, and I think we need to be, I need to be maybe better about making sure voters understand this. So Alan, in 2016, won an election to a 4-year term. So he's in the middle of a 4-year term right now. If he loses this race, he will stay on City Council. If he wins this race, his seat will be vacated, and actually it will be appointed by whoever has the majority on City Council at that time. So for voters, Alan Mansour will be on City Council regardless of the outcome of this election. I think this is the opportunity, one, to have 2 District 5 residents on City Council, but the opportunity to have someone on City Council like me, who is a problem solver, proven to really work hard for our community, and again, someone who's born and raised on the West Side.
So one final question. Why should the voters of District 5 vote for you?
So we've talked about some of the challenges that Costa Mesa faces, right? Homelessness, the sober living homes, development issues. All of those issues require collaboration, not just among council members, but with stakeholders outside the council. On homelessness, this is a regional problem, we need to work regionally. I mentioned on sober living homes, we need cooperation with our state assembly. On development issues, we need to have really good communication with our residents and our developers and other stakeholders. So as an engineer, I consider myself a trained problem solver. My professional experience is in effectiveness, cost effectiveness of different solutions. So I am trained, I've done this for 10 years, trained in looking at potential solutions, figuring out whether they're going to be effective and then worth the investment, and giving advice on investing more in strategies that do work and stopping strategies that don't work. In my professional career, I've managed multidisciplinary teams, I've managed contractors, I've managed budgets. But I think most importantly, I am from Costa Mesa and my heart is with Costa Mesa. I will put my boots on the ground and work alongside residents to really fight for the issues that residents need us to be working on.